Join the Ungovernables. No filters, no apologies. This season, we're cracking open Uniswap governance. Welcome to a new episode of the Ungovernable Podcast.
Welcome to a new episode of the Ungovernable Podcast. Today we are joined with Billy Gao, the VP of Stanford Blockchain Club. Billy is shaping how tomorrow's protocols will govern, grow, and scale. Not just another blockchain enthusiast, he is a multidisciplinary thinker, reimagining how we collaborate, govern, and create value in the digital age. We are Joe and Austin of AlphaGrowth, your premier DeFi Operations and Growth firm. Billy, thanks for being here. What else should our listeners know about you?
Thank you very much for the invitation, and it's an honor to be here. No, I think that's a very comprehensive introduction, and glad to get kickstarted today.
So, from mechanical engineering to computational linguistics, you've obviously got a head on your shoulders. What was your very first interaction with the blockchain?
It was quite a while ago, to be honest. So that was before I came to Stanford. So originally, I was based in Hong Kong. I grew up there, and I did a lot of math, as most nerds do, back in high school. And my main focus was basically poking around and seeing what's interesting to me. And back in high school, I stumbled upon mathematics modeling, which is basically trying to use equations and variables to answer things in real life. And one of the questions that I was curious about would be stocks or like crypto, like coin performances. And that was something that got me intrigued, especially during the last bull run. And outside of that, I also did research on cryptography. So back in high school, we had to do this kind of like a thesis statement thing to graduate. And for my high school research, I basically did my paper on elliptic curves. So that was a great kickstart. And kind of from that point onwards, I got into the crypto scene, joined venture capital in Hong Kong that was researching basically crypto back in the day. And that kind of got me kickstarted, and it was a fun journey since.
Say again what your thesis was on. Did you say elliptic curves?
Exactly, yep.
Will you give the TLDR on what that is?
It's basically the encryption, like one of the parts of encryption. So my kind of motivation back then was basically how Bitcoin uses elliptic curves. So even nowadays in like discrete logs, you have elliptic curve discrete log, which is one way to it's part of like a lot of it's basically part of since discrete log is hard to solve and elliptic curve discrete log is kind of an easy way to do things on that part. It's like a trapdoor function that makes things easier, and it's basically a hash function in that sort.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I don't want to bore anybody with that stuff. That's above me. But okay, so
it's
let's
fun.
see.
It's
How
fun.
did you? I don't know if fun would be the word most people would use for that stuff, but I'll give it to you. How did you jump into DAO governance?
Again, I guess the theme here is pure poking around and see what's interesting. So I came to Stanford, joined Stanford Blockchain, and learned a lot more about basically what the club is working on. And to get when I joined the club, I learned I got a wide exposure to a lot of interesting stuff, and one of the very interesting stuffs was DAO governance, or like we have our own governance team. We are delegated on Uniswap. We work with other protocols and DAOs as well. So I thought, hey, that's interesting. Let's have a poke at it, and that basically became what I did for the first stint when I was in the club.
Okay,
Did you have
Go ahead, Austin. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like for student organizations, there's a lot more than just like governance and voting, right? What else do you do at the blockchain club?
At our club, we actually have a lot of different branches. So, for instance, we have our research branch. We have our own magazine, Stanford Blockchain Review, where we publish articles written by students. It could be technical like it could be economic incentives things. It could be like, for instance, about stablecoins. It could be legal related. We have all sorts of stuff on that end. We work together with the School of Engineering, law school, business school on a lot of research stuff. Outside that, we also have our own engineering / project endeavors. So some of those, we work with different protocols. For instance, Optimism, we work with them on some research / engineering stuff. Outside that, we have an accelerator / investment branch, which we work together with. And we also have governance, of course, and all sorts of different stuff. And within the club, we also have a huge variety of composition with people interested in different things.
Really firing all cylinders. In which do you kind of line up with? I saw you were also a co-editor for the articles that were being written.
Yeah, I did that for a stint. Again, like at our club, like it's a very decentralized process, and it's like you get to get in touch with a lot of different things. And personally, I think I took a stab at most things and seen what's interesting. And yeah, that was my stint back then.
So do you, I guess another question about this, how do you feel like your perspective has evolved since you started in the decentralized governance space till now? You know, being able to see all these different pieces, whether it's like research, editing, articles, this could be like the grants. I believe you're a part of that as well. So how kind of has your perspective evolved since you first started in decentralized governance?
Great question. I think like most people coming into crypto, you start off with a very naive kind of way, I would even say. Like you have this overly, I don't know, theoretical or academic type of concept coming in. At least that was me. And afterwards, learning a lot more about the scene, being completely immersed in crypto Twitter, you get kind of a whole different view, and you realize what a lot of thing is going on, and you see a lot of, I would say, changes and developments even through the past 2 years. A lot of the things for instance, when I first entered the scene, there was a lot about like NFTs and stuff, and that's totally gone. Like you see things come and go, but at the same time, you also hear certain narratives or certain concepts that continues to be there, and some innovations that hasn't really changed throughout time as well.
What about from the Pantera lens? I know that's not so much in the degen NFT space, but about as far from that as you could get. Very, very professional.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised, but like there's also some like very interesting degen conversations on that end as well, and we're open to quite a lot of stuff. But on that end, it's more from an investment perspective, and we're one of the largest crypto investment firms out there in early stage projects. And it's been really fun working together with them. And yeah, that's basically on that end.
On the Pantera is one of the biggest names in venture in this space.
Yep.
And in my opinion, the purpose of venture capital is really to accelerate the solution of a problem in a specific vertical, right? So what have you seen? Well, first of all, what is Pantera in your mind? What is Pantera's thesis?
There's a lot of different, so crypto is a huge scene. There's a lot of different subsectors, and we have kind of thesis in different, like within different areas, we have different thesis. But in general, it's, as you say, it's accelerating the development of blockchain, and we're looking for projects that are both like technically sound, like with the right team, with the right product, as well as basically pushing forward the industry as a general. And I think that's the main difference in a way from a student blockchain club and from a venture capital firm. from the perspective of a venture capital firm, you have a more holistic, broad view of the entire industry, and you kind of what you do is kind of nudge around and try to push things forward in some ways and back the right projects in that kind of way.
Are there any specific problems that you still see in the crypto space that are begging for solutions that you guys are actively seeking, or is it more of just an inbound approach where you guys will look at everything and if it sounds like it's a good fit for something, then you'll pursue it?
I think I'll flip the question in another way, as in what I like. So personally, I think there's loads of problems within the crypto industry, as we would all see and know. There isn't much. Like your question was basically like, what problems do we see? My answer is basically there's all sorts of problems, and there's like all areas we would see problems. So it's not necessarily like an inbound approach. We have loads of thesis around different areas. We have technical ones, we have more economic ones, and I think that is kind of reflected on the way we invest as well.
What would be the number one problem that you would say exists right now still in the space? I know there's a lot of them, but is there if you had to just put your finger on one of them?
There's loads of different issues around the space. I think within the team as well, we all have different kind of focuses. Personally, I can just say like the type of things that personally I'm more interested in, and that would probably be the more technical ones, and that's where I spend more of my time. So for instance, you have your cryptography, your privacy, your security as a narrative, and that's something I think would continue to grow as a subsector within crypto, and that's something I'm personally interested in as well.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot in that space too, especially with privacy, especially as more and more institutions come on chain. Being able to, not have everything out in public, but still be able to do the things that you want to do and leverage blockchain technology in the way that it's capable of doing.
On the lens of institutional, there's always a lot of talk on RWA and stables, and I think from a project kind of point that there's a lot of people working within that area, and that's all, of course, like extremely interesting and a safe-ish bet in general.
Yeah, that's for sure. What do you think about like dark pools? Do you get to touch on that at all with Pantera?
It's not my focus. Like I do mostly like investment early stage stuff and less of the liquidity and that kind of things. But that's what I would say. Like you would be surprised about like degen stuff on that end.
Well, it sounds like it's a lot of fun. Well, I guess outside of like Web3, reading proposals, analyzing different projects, what do you do to stay sane?
Great question. And so for that, I do like I don't know, like nerd stuff in general, I guess. Like I'm a student overall, so you have to go to classes, go do lectures, like go to lectures, do homework, that kind of stuff. But like outside that, I like sports. I like watching a lot of sports as well. I play basketball, table tennis, and also things along those lines. And in my free time, I find myself playing online chess quite a lot, but that's just me.
Hey, there you go. What's your chess rating?
I don't have an official one actually, which
Okay.
is I've like again, it's a hobby of mine that I've like self-learned, self-played. Like it's fun, and I do that quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like chess is a great way to kind of soothe the mind a little bit, but still be a little active.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to touch back on like the Stanford Blockchain Club. I know that you're a delegate, a part of many different protocols and working with multiple organizations outside of those DAO protocols. How do you reconcile the ideals of decentralization and the ideals of decentralized governance with the actual real world friction, where it's hard to, keep up and get things done in the fast-paced nature of DeFi?
Okay. A lot of very interesting things to talk about on that end, and it's a huge rabbit hole to dig into. So reconciled. So we acknowledge that we are a student blockchain club, and like that comes with its benefits and disadvantages. And we acknowledge that that is the situation. So first of all, we are being delegated. We are a delegate, and a lot of the people that delegate to us are centralized in ways, for instance, large capital funds. And what we are trying to do is kind of using our own lens, view, expertise in a way to contribute towards DAO governance and to give our views, our perspective on that, and to try and make things more decentralized, or to offer our own resources, or to try and push things forward in that end. So for that, what I mean is, for instance, like contributing our own opinions, our own voices at times, and at the same time, we recognize the resources that come with a university blockchain club. For instance, we get access to top tier talent, be it student developers, be it researchers, PhDs, professors. That's something that we are good at, and we have a really academic view on that point, and we're really good at research. I'm sure I don't have to elaborate on that point. So that's something we can push towards, for instance, in making things more decentralized in general.
Yeah, so you'd say almost like that research component, academic component, you can add that flavor and perspective where other folks might not be able to see that from the get-go.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing as well, like, so we recognize a lot of people within the industry, especially within governance, are like professional delegates. And that's basically why how things work, and why people are willing to do DAO governance in a lot of ways. And a lot of these people have been in the scene for a long time, and they have a certain view on what things are doing. They might have different narratives, or they fall into different blocks, but they are experienced in some ways. And from the perspective of a university blockchain club, what we always bring is a sense of optimism, or a sense of naivety that things could be better, or what we offer our own views on that point. And that's really why I think having university blockchain clubs is super important, despite there's people like of course, like being against the concept of universities within DAO governance, and I totally see their point. But on the other hand, I would say that we offer a unique perspective with our own unique lens, with our own unique resources that is really irreplaceable in some ways within DAO governance.
I would definitely agree. I think we've heard, of course, some of the very based opinions from people that are like, yeah, this billion-dollar treasury is controlled by a bunch of college kids. And I think there's a fine line, right? If every single delegate were a student blockchain organization, then that might be cause for concern. But in most cases, that's not the case. There's all kinds of different delegates with different perspectives. So in regular politics, I'll use the U.S. as the golden child example. But some people say like, oh, the U.S. is democracy. It's not a democracy. If it were, that we'd have a very different situation here. But it's kind of similar actually to the way that a DAO works, where yes, if you have one token and you vote on a Uniswap proposal, it doesn't matter, right? Like, yes, it has the elements of democracy, but it also doesn't actually matter if you just have one token. What really matters is what the delegates decide. And that's kind of how it transfers over to the representative republic that the United States of America is with their voting. So, okay, I'll land the plane. What I'm trying to know here is, do you think that DAOs and delegates should listen to what the community says and then vote accordingly? Or do you think that the point of having delegates and professional delegates is so that they take their expertise and they bring their expertise to the front lines of decision making?
Of course, it's a bit of both. Like that's
how do you weigh those two together?
Okay. This might be a step back, and then I'll use your approach. I'll land the plane in a bit. So, we have been looking at different governance mechanisms, And one thing that is consensus basically is that within any type of governance system, what you're trying to do is to maximize the social optimality or like social utility. You want to be representative of what people think and make the best decision for the DAO, for the organization, or whatever like context we're putting it in. It might be like real life like politics or anything. You want to make the best decision for the community, and the problem with sometimes having everyone chime in and having everyone's voice listened is that sometimes the necessary expertise on a decision or necessary context information might not be fully captured for an entire crowd. So, for instance, within DAO governance, there's some perhaps extremely, I don't know, technical concepts that your everyday day-to-day protocol, like someone with a uni token might not understand, or there might be some economics incentives where my everyday uni holder or would not have time to read into. And at that time, you would need a delegate who is willing to spend more time, read more information, form their own opinion, and have their expertise to basically vote and make decisions in that way. And I do think a huge part of being a delegate is to inform and to share your perspective on why you get there. And again, this is going on a tangent. What we are also looking at in some of our governance research is how can we make this process more quote unquote democratized. So for instance, as a uni token holder, you can better pick the delegate that would fit your views the best, so that your views would be represented and you are trying to make the best decision for the entire DAO. And even one step further, it's another trend within governance that we have been looking at is potentially having AI agents being a representation of your views, such that we have more customized agents to vote on your behalf and making the best decision for the entire community.
So then if you've got an entire community that believes, well, okay, I'll take one more step back, and I appreciate you going into such detail with that, but I think there's a lot of assumptions that have to be made at a certain point. And one of those is you mentioned is to just serve the DAO and to serve the community. And you kind of alluded to the fact that that's dependent on what you are optimizing for. And so we'll take Uniswap as an example. When we serve the DAO, serve the Uniswap, if you're a delegate at Uniswap, you're trying to make decisions that will best serve the DAO. Is that the token holders? Is that the sustainability of the DAO's treasury? Is that the protocol itself? How would you, for Uniswap as a specific example, what does it mean to serve the DAO?
For us, it would be the protocol itself, and by extension, token holders. So in a totally ideal world, although this is definitely not the case, a better protocol would lead to better, the token holders would benefit if the protocol is being improved. And that's what we're trying to do. And in a way, again, that's one of the uniqueness of a university blockchain club. We don't really have a lot of vested interest or like financial interest on our own end. We're not trying to maximize our own bags. We're not trying to pump anything in that end. So we can be less quote unquote evil on that end as well.
And I hate to I'm not being contrarian for contrarian's sake, but I will argue that the Uniswap protocol and serving the token holders, I feel like those two things are uncorrelated. I know there's a lot of speculation that happens with a governance token and whether or not the protocol is performing, but functionally speaking, those two are completely independent of one another. The Uniswap token does not have to exist for the Uniswap protocol to be the ubiquitous liquidity layer of the internet, right? Technically speaking, if labs were to just, do their thing forever and keep crushing it with branding, and I think it could still be a huge thing without the token itself being a part of it.
Yeah, that's a totally valid point, and I agree to what you're saying. But like that's basically what we are trying to maximize for. Like in general, what we're trying to do is to make a positive contribution on the industry, and like from the day-to-day decisions that we are making, what we believe is that we're trying to make the protocol better, and from that point onwards, we'll make the token holders better. Like that's basically reflected in all the decisions that we make. And in some ways, like taking a step back, it's impossible. Like we would not be trying to push one down for the other. Like we will not try to sacrifice token holders for the protocols, or vice versa, like totally like bin off the protocol for token holders. Like that's really not what we want to do as well.
Ideally, you want to see both go up, right? Both exactly. Ships rise with the tides. Is there, and this doesn't necessarily have to pertain to Uniswap, but just all of your experience with governance, has there ever been a time that's very memorable for you where the entire active community was very for or against something, yet you guys went ahead and just laid down the hammer and you're like, no, we've got to do the opposite of what the community wants because we think that this is best for you?
I think there's a lot of contentious / interesting discussions where like there has been both sides to it. And in a lot of cases, we have stood our own ground and like argued what we stand for and what we think is best. Like 2 examples would be in the wormhole layer 0 case back in the days, and Unichain like earlier, late last year-ish, like 2 of the instances that we were quite opinionated on certain points of view, and we stood by it.
Yeah, so one thing, Billy, I wanted to dive in on that you had mentioned previously that I thought was super interesting was like LLMs or AI essentially being leveraged in DAO governance. How do you feel like it's going to be utilized in the process? I know you kind of said it's like somebody being kind of essentially something that somebody can set up that will vote for them based on their preferences, but how else do you think that LLMs could be used or even misused in DAO voting?
Oh yeah, misuse is a very common idea that we like. Let's be honest, nowadays on forums you can see a lot of things are AI written, and that is the case. Like some delegates would use AI for their assistance, be it to draft up proposals or to make their responses. It is the case. Like we're seeing it, and it is what it is on that end. But on AI agents, it's an ongoing research, and it's something that we are super interested in, and we are doing research with lots of different parties on that. And the week before last week, we also held like Stanford's blockchain governance summit at our law school, and we had extensive discussions on legals, on the future developments, and one of the topics that came up recursively was, of course, AI agents. What we think is that with AI agents, it kind of makes things more convenient, and what we hope is that this could increase participation. Of course, participation is a huge problem within governance. People don't tend to vote from times, especially your like layman token holders. And what we're trying to do is make that process easier and to kind of shift where you can shift where you pay attention to. And I can go into that as well. But basically, we're like there's a lot of ongoing research on that area.
So how would it improve participation? Is this going to be like the AI voting for the delegates, or is this the AI essentially weeding out all the noise to focus on key topics that they're interested in?
There's a lot of ways that we're looking at. So for instance, a more primal or like a more easier, the more like first step achievable process is to have some kind of delegate chooser. So for instance, if you go on, I don't know, like Tally Agora for Uniswap, like you see a huge page of different delegates, and if you were just a uni token holder, first of all, you might not even get to that point. But even if you get to that point, you would be blindsided by, okay, what should I choose? Like, which delegate should I delegate to? Should I just randomly pick one of those? If we were to have a basic, even for instance, take the AI out of the question, have a questionnaire, and then you can fill in all your preferences, and then it would fit the best, like the delegate that might fit your interest best. That might be a first step, and that could make things much easier. So more people would be involved within governance. But if we were to bring in more things, I don't know, like it could be used as, for instance, a summarizer. It could tell you, okay, based on the previous voting history of this particular delegate, like this, where they stand on the general spectrum. This is where you stand on the general spectrum. This proposal is about sort and sort, and explained in more simpler words. Or if it's, for instance, if it's technical, you can have it explained to you in simpler terms. Or if it's like 15 pages long, it can have a TLDR version of it. There's a lot of things that might come with it. It's a lot of like in progress stuff, basically.
What are you most excited about, Billy?
In an ideal world, we hope that there could be AI agents to help you make the decision-making process easier. But of course, we recognize that there's bottlenecks and there are concerns. So for instance, it's basically, if you have an AI agent vote for you, that might go haywire. Like you might what is the decision made on? Do you actually agree with that? Like there might be a lot of ways that you could hack that system as well. So yeah, it's something that's really exciting, some new stuff on that end. But at the same time, we do recognize that it's still a work in progress.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of exciting stuff ahead, especially with AI. I wanted to touch on like the futurarchy as like some emerging alternatives to governance and voting, especially putting kind of your money where your mouth is. What's your perspective on different governance experience like futurarchy?
I think it's a very interesting experiment, and that's kind of what the space is good for. Like within blockchain governance, we can quickly iterate on different process, and futurarchy is one of the interesting mechanisms that we are seeing. There's a lot of sides to it. So first of all, it works in certain settings. So prediction markets in general, it works where there is a general, like, basically, there are assumptions or like underlying properties that have to fit in order for futurarchy to work in a governance setting and decision-making setting. One of them is that people know what they're trying to do. And the second thing is it's easy to settle, or there's a way of settling it. And these are some theoretical things that might not fit a lot of protocols. And outside futurarchy, we also have, for instance, sortition. That's something being discussed, and also a lot of technical or social mechanisms that might be involved. So for instance, we have cryptographic methods to make voting more private and secure. We also have social incentives. For instance, if you use reputation, there's also talks about proof of personhood, those kind of things involved in governance, involved in voting. These are a lot of different narratives and directions that we are looking into, basically.
Yeah,
Billy,
what do you think? Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Just real quick on that note, there's of all these different innovations, all the way back to essentially an AI LLM layer on top of the forums that would actually help facilitate decision making, all the way to some of these other concepts and experiments that you're talking about. Whose responsibility is this to implement these? Is it Agora and Tally? Is it Discourse? Or are these third-party apps that are going to be built on top of these platforms that already exist and already own the distribution?
What do you mean by that? So we have been seeing like different, I guess it's third parties or like companies basically with their own. So for instance, within futurarchy, there's quite a few people doing a lot of innovation within that, and we're seeing people trying to implement it this way. For a lot of I don't think foundations are doing it. Basically, that's for one. And if DAOs want to implement that, although I think it's still some way off from these things being like in DAOs, that might be another option if that's what we're talking about.
So, for instance, I'll go back to the specific example that really
Yep.
resonated was when you mentioned how a lot of delegates use AI for, and you can just, like you said, you can just tell. You read it and you're like, no, this isn't human.
Yep.
It's just like a little bit too formulaic and structured for it to be a real personable and real opinion of someone. And so, for instance, you remember in school, you had to use turnitin.com, and then it would tell you what percentage of this was plagiarized. I think it would be pretty interesting if a specific governance community could turn on via Tally or Agora, Discourse, wherever the forums exist. If you could turn on something that would automatically flag a comment or a proposal for, this had 92% of this was just AI generated. And then it would incentivize people to be more human and more involved in what was going on. So for instance, something like that would be, I think it would necessitate that would exist directly on top of the forums, because these, Discourse, for instance, has the distribution. Instead, you don't want people to have to go somewhere else to engage and make it a little bit more difficult. As it is, there's already Discourse and Snapshot and Tally for the Uniswap, right? And so I think that the more that we can bundle all of that up into one product, I think the better. And it's probably about time that we have Dennison back on the podcast to talk through what Tally is doing and how they're innovating, because they do have an incredible product for sure.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should mention that, but if you mentioned it, yeah, that's something they're doing as well, and yeah,
it is awesome. So, what would you say? Touching back on Uniswap, you're obviously involved in a lot of different DAOs. You've seen a lot of different governance. You've seen a lot of execution in governance and function and dysfunction potentially. What distinguishes Uniswap from other DAOs that you've seen?
It's the OG kind of. Okay, so few things. First of all, at Stanford Blockchain, Uniswap is kind of our main DAO that we focus on from the club side. So that's, of course, something that distincts Uniswap from others from our perspective. But at the same time, within the industry, it's kind of as I said, the original exchange, the original swapper, and it's basically what started it all, and it's very important in that end, and yeah, that's how we see it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with the long-standing tenure, it's hard to focus on anything else for Uniswap. I guess, what are you most excited about, Billy, in terms of Uniswap for like long-term growth?
I think Unichain is a great innovation in that way, capturing your own value back on like basically instead of leaking it. And I think a lot of developments are in the right direction technically, and these are all quite exciting in their own ways.
Yeah, why do you feel Unichain over V4?
It's V4 is kind of like a sustainable innovation, sustainable increase on top of things, but Unichain might have the potential to like being able to capture your own value, and we're trying to see how much it can go to and level of like it. I'm actually really excited and really curious to see how things could go on that end, and to what extent could it possibly set a trend, or like it's a new space for innovation, and it's new in its own ways.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on, especially with the super chain, and really being the liquidity layer there to open up other opportunities on the super chain. I guess, Billy, what are some of the like key on-chain indicators that you feel like are important for Unichain to hit, like aside from TVL?
Uh, I think we discussed this in like when we had our first call, and what like I really care about is like activity. So basically daily swaps, daily usage, fees, revenues, that kind of stuff. And that's really what I care about. And that's how you indicate that it's active, people are using it, it's a good product, and people are coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's organic. It's gonna stay after incentives end.
Yep.
So speaking of that, so there a couple days ago when I checked on Merkle, for instance, there were I think $420,000 of uni incentives being distributed daily. That was daily rewards. So 400 grand in daily uni being sent out. I think today it's about half that. First question is, do you agree with that as a means for growth?
Mm-hmm. A few things, like back when the proposal of came out, like there was a huge discussion. We were involved in a lot of them. We had our own opinions in different ways, and the the low hanging fruit is basically as a delegate. As a delegate, a lot of times what we do is basically rebut or like question decisions, and the low hanging fruit is basically whether if this is effective or not. Like where are we spending all this money to? Why are we doing this? Why are we not putting it to better use? And of course, that is a question that we should ask, and that is of course the first like approach. Whether or not this is effective, what are we looking for in returns? What's the like key benchmarks that we're looking for? But on the other hand, another thing from my personal perspective is that where else are we spending the treasury, or like what's the purpose of the treasury if we are not moving it and it's just staying there? We have to put it to use. And so for instance, you can have a huge treasury but a dead protocol, and that is not what we want to see. And what we want to see in the ideal scenario is the funds being put into good use. But if we cannot have optimal use of funding, what's the next? What's the step we would rather take? Would we rather not spend the treasury and like do nothing, or would we rather have a more ineffective usage of the treasury for some kind of effects?
And that is definitely fair. Is there other strategies that you would say that we're missing out on, in experiments that we're not necessarily running for Unichain and V4 growth at the moment?
I think again, this is completely coming from a university blockchain club point of view, and this is something I've mentioned to the foundation as well. I think there is a lot that can be done in the younger dev/eco community. So what the general ecosystem needs, like this is something that the foundation has mentioned as well as in general. You need devs, you need people interested in it, you need people talking about it. Maybe not entirely from the foundation, a bit of my own words as well, but that's what you want ideally. And I think from a university blockchain club point of view, we see that there are a lot of these talents roaming around that can be captured. So, for instance, there's talented developers, there's aspiring founders at Stanford. Is there any way that, or are there any things that we can do to capture them? For instance, I don't know, like events, staff grants, to make them aware of this is something, a good opportunity they could build on. There's definitely more that could be done on this perspective. And I really think that university blockchain clubs or university students should be something that a lot more, be it DAOs, be it protocols, should focus on, because there are talents that are equivalent, like they might be less experienced compared to existing devs, but they could be unwrapped super quickly and they are super malleable as devs. That's for one. And for two, it's a great way to have a new sense, a unique perspective in a lot of ways. They contribute new ideas, and more practically, it's way cheaper. And you can get good ideas, people working on stuff for a fraction of the cost of what I think most people are doing now.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a great pipeline as well as Uniswap becomes less and less of like a DEX and more of like key infrastructure, whether that's like V4 or Unichain. Having those folks launching protocols, launching projects, you're just going to gain more and more traction as more and more folks and more builders come onto your, let's say the app store of DeFi essentially. So that way they're building killer apps and have reasons for other folks to get onto the Uniswap platform.
Definitely.
Like one thing I want to touch on, Billy, was the Unichain aspect. So I know there's been a lot of focus on like the DEX for Uniswap and growing TBL there. What do you think the next or the low hanging fruit is for Unichain to get to that next level of growth?
UVN, it's something that can be improved in general, how it from our perspective, of course, how it coordinates with the DAOs, how decision making, like the processes can be made. There's things to be smoothened out, and of course, there are also like technical decisions or ecosystem things that, to be honest, from our perspective, we are not that involved. Like it's not our decision to make, but there's of course stuff that could be done there as well.
Yeah, maybe quick, could you give like the TLDR on the UVN so the listeners know what we're talking about?
Ooh, I don't think off the top of my head I could give a good. I don't think I can give a good like explanation, but it's basically validation nodes, and there is their own system. I've read on the paper for a while ago.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. And maybe we want to touch on a little bit about Unity 4.
Yeah, have you seen, from whether it's just your Stanford hat or your Pantera hat, have you seen any V4 hook use cases that are very exciting, or maybe anything that Pantera is invested in around V4 hooks?
I think so.
Nothing.
I'm not too sure. From my perspective, that was again not my focus of projects. So yeah, I'm not too sure. I'll be totally honest.
No, that's all right. So, has there just personally though? Have you seen any V4 hooks that you're excited about?
I think there's been talks on a lot of like DeFi projects building on top of it. I wouldn't really pinpoint to anything, and from our perspective from the perspective of Stanford blockchain, again, it's not really it's not really our decision to make or like involved in our process in that way, but we are seeing innovation. For instance, from the DAO's perspective, we are seeing for instance, a few days ago there was the RV proposal. Those are the things that we are paying more attention to on that end.
So then maybe one thing that little higher level that might make sense, considering you represent both Uniswap and Pantera. How would you feel about a fund, a Uniswap ecosystem fund that would accelerate and incubate early V4 hook builders and make sure that the cream of the crop? For instance, right now there's no way there's no specific Uniswap V4 hook fund, and one thing that we've heard a lot of from different builders is they're essentially building a V4 hook is not just adding a couple lines of code. It's you're basically building a new DeFi protocol from scratch, and so they're running into this cold start problem. And so each individual hook needs liquidity bootstrapping, they need marketing, they need a full team to essentially build and grow these different protocols. And so one of the things that we're exploring on the Uniswap growth side, working with the Treasury Working Group and the UAC and some other folks, is potentially once there's a DUNA set up and the legal ramifications are all out of the way, we're exploring this idea of a Uniswap ecosystem fund that would be investing in high upside projects that are promising with strong teams. So is that something that you guys have ever thought about? Is that anything that Pantera has ever explored doing, like an ecosystem fund style with one of its portfolio companies?
Okay. So a few things, I guess. So it depends on like an ecosystem fund would. It depends on where the funding is coming from, and I guess from what you are trying to infer is from like venture capitals for them to bootstrap a fund of that sort. Or I'm
It could
not
be
sure,
both.
but like
Open-ended. Yeah,
Mhm.
open-ended question. It could be
Yeah.
Uniswap DAO that invests. It could be some of Uniswap's venture partners that put together the fund. It's super early conversation here, so would love to just get your unabridged opinions about something like a V4 innovation fund.
Yeah. So the parallel that I would draw to is within Arbitrum, there's a gaming fund with kind of for their own ecosystem and that kind of thing, and it's more from Arbitrum itself instead of from venture capital. Since from venture capital, it's you want a breadth of different projects, and you want to like it makes sense for you to kind of invest in different things instead of put all of your investments within one ecosystem. So that's on that side. And is it something that so I think it's more of an incentive dev grant scheme that the foundation or the DAO could muster up. That would make more sense. In short, that's my thoughts.
And that is, yeah, probably more of what will materialize is something from the DAO itself. And I
Yeah.
think the main thing there is that the DAO retains exposure and upside to the success of the projects that it incubates, right? If
Yeah, for instance, in off-chain, they have a similar project. They have a similar program where you basically try to invest in early stage teams, early stage projects, and it's kind of their own stuff on that end. And yeah, I don't see why like from a foundation from a protocol side, it makes sense, but from a venture side, it would probably be more difficult in practice.
not so much. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I know that the Wormhole Ecosystem Fund is called Borderless, and it is similar to what I was alluding to, where it's essentially a venture fund that exists inside of the Wormhole ecosystem as a whole. But again, still early conversations. I think there's a lot that can be done once all the ducks are in a row there. Billy, what are some of the experiments that you believe Uniswap is not running? They should be like crazy. No wrong answers here. Bad idea party. It's like some of the craziest ideas you've had that you wish you could take to the forums and make happen.
Okay. One thing that it's less crazy is on the dev side, and that's something I've mentioned, like integrating student devs and that kind of early stage, early career, early talent pipeline. I think that's a low hanging fruit that should be done. But a more reach thing, again, this is something I've discussed with some parties as well, is to have kind of a DAO manager or like okay, step back. A lot of delegates. It's okay. One, it's easy to criticize. It's difficult to execute. Two, it's difficult to execute in general because you're a delegate. So one step that could be made is to have someone that, and three, of course, a lot of these delegates, they have conflict of interest. Way more than Stanford blockchain because we at most our main thing is Uniswap. We work with other protocols, but not to the level that they do, where there might be a lot of times a lot of protocols are doing similar things, and being a delegate on different protocols means that there is conflict in different ways. And what I'm possibly suggesting is to hire out a firm. It might be an existing delegate. It might be someone extremely experienced within the space and have them solely focus on DAO management, be it proposal, be it ecosystem, be it coordinating things, governance mechanisms, all sorts, and have someone to live and think about Uniswap, someone who can focus on figuring ways to make it a better place instead of multitasking different DAOs and delegating and working on the delegations when they're it's like instead of being just one small fraction of what they do, it's the whole thing that they do about.
It's almost like hiring a president, right? Someone that they can be held accountable.
Not necessarily president, but I would say for a secretary, that would probably be a better way. Someone to help you do things, organize things around, make things, instead of like nowadays, you kind of have a lot of part-time secretaries, or like a lot of people that are involved but are delegates, but instead you kind of want someone to be like outside the foundation which has a thin governance team, to actually have someone who can work on the DAO and focus on that.
Yeah, just almost somebody held accountable and kind of moving things forward.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, so Billy, one more question for Uniswap. If you had total control of the treasury, 41 million Uni delegated to you, for the Uniswap DAO treasury, what would you do? What's the first thing you do
Buy
with
the
the
labs.
treasury? Buy what? Buy labs?
Or some sort of that. Again, that's a stretch, but it's an interesting idea I've had for a bit, or like partial ownership or some sort of things, such that there is better incentive alignment. So like
Great connection immediately.
yeah, that goes back to something we discussed, like equity versus tokens, like which one from a foundation, from a labs, from a DAO perspective, you're looking at different things. And as a delegate, we are kind of focusing on trying to make the DAO and the protocol a better place. And that's something we discussed earlier. That's like a stretch slash an interesting thing that it's an interesting stretch.
Yeah, I like it. That's the first time we've heard that.
What's the other answers that you guys got?
Fee switch is number one, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
I really do like that. You got me thinking, Billy. Hold on a second. I wonder what would be the value, like what is market valuation of Uniswap Labs? I
don't think we can buy the entire. There's no way. But like they have good people. They have good devs. Like labs have good devs. That like if we could poach some. But yeah. It's interesting.
That'd be such a unique M&A situation that would go down, I think, in history if this Magic Internet Money purchased the company that created the protocol that's managed by the Magic Internet Money. I think that'd be such a cool thing. I like it a lot. Billy, thank you for your time here. Where can everybody keep track of your work and your opinions?
Twitter, that's probably the easiest way. It's basically what's currently rolling on screen. Perfect timing.
Okay.
Stanford blockchain as well. That's what we're hosting a lot of events. We're doing a lot of stuff, and we welcome a lot of people to work with us. And going into the next year, I'll be leading the club. So if there's anything, that's also a way to communicate and reach out.
Love it. All right. Well, that is a wrap of another episode. Billy, thank you for your insights. For our listeners, do not forget to subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Dropping new episodes each week. Follow us on X @GrowUniswap to stay up to date. That was the Ungovernable Podcast. We are Joe and Austin. See everybody next week. Thanks again, Billy.
This was the Ungovernable Podcast by AlphaGrowth. Watch all our episodes on YouTube or Spotify or weekly live on X.